Good to see everyone. And recently, you were asked, or I was asked, regarding a player that goes from year one into year two, and that's something I think probably all of you have covered from time to time. I think it's absolutely the truth, and we have some players that are making the jump from year one into year two, and I see their trajectory, going, on the way up. I also had said back to them that I think it's very true that it happens for a specific unit going from year one into year two. And so for us defensively, it's players, it's coaches, it's roles, it's knowing one another, it's knowing how to communicate more clearly and quickly. When you have that process in place going in for your second lap at it, you get a little tighter, you get a little stronger. And so although it's true from player-wise, year one to year two is usually when the biggest jumps make, I also felt like from a system standpoint, it's usually when you make your best jumps, as an offense or a defense or a special teams, just because of that connection player to player. You recognize you're more of an extension of one another, and I certainly feel that from the training camp of this group of where we're headed and the additions that we've made.
Dan, David Moore, Dallas Morning News. With that being said, in some ways, is it more difficult? You hear this in golf a lot, where you go from hundreds down into upper 80s. Is it more difficult to make that next jump, which is more incremental than maybe what you made last year?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. Of course, anytime you're really good and you're trying to punch through to the next ceiling to go to the next space, it's a little more challenging. But I think also in a good way, you can get there a little faster because you have a better awareness of all the things that you need to do. And so having a self-awareness, these are the one or two things we need to tweak or get better at. In fact, we just did some of this just last week. We went through a good bit of our training camp practices, scrimmage against other teams, what things before we even got into our game plan preparation that we want to just nail. And so I think that's always the case as you're trying to refine, get a little bit better. And we weren't talking about, these big jumps. We were talking about some specific things regarding a specific coverage or some way to play it. And so in fact, we dug into that pretty hard just, over the last few practices.
Michael Galkin, Dallas Morning News. Based on your experience, is it predictive in terms of, if I was to ask you in January which players are going to make the second-year jump, you can tell based on your time with that player? Sometimes does the guy surprise you? What ultimately dictates whether or not a guy makes that jump?
That's a good question, I would say, because it's not every player. I would say that is also true. But you sense after that year and you're done and you kind of give the after action, these are the things that you have to improve upon. And in my experience, the players who had the most awareness about how to improve, those are the ones that really dug in to find, the answers, because it's not just as easy as going to kindergarten. Hello, I'm here, I'm sitting in the seat. How do I get better? It's a matter of, I also saw that in my game. I also saw that. So usually when you want to visit with a player as you're setting the course for the off season, not only do you give them some ideas about some things you can improve upon, but for instance, say, Michael, it was, I thought you needed to improve on, guarding a tight end and man-to-man, but you also want to be a better blitzer. I would say let's work both things because you saw something in your game that you wanted to improve upon. So I think that's very valuable too, to make sure it's not just what I think, but it's also what the player thinks. And so when you combine those two things, that's usually when you see the big jumps happen. Some of them are developmental, like in size or strength, usually at this level, nobody's going to get, too much faster as it goes from year one to year two, but your skills can get better. And that's usually the things that you find. And there's been a few players this year that I've seen that jump take place because they, had a real plan of how they're going to go attack the off season. And some of them you could get better in a shorter time. For one like Mukuamu, it was going to take all through camp of some of the things that I wanted to see. So he was making all the steps and, ticking the box, so to speak, but it wasn't until I saw the preseason games that I was going to say it's come full circle on his improvement. So some are smaller where by the end of the offseason, did you get better at this? And some are longer range. Long answer, but I think it's kind of points out the development and the improvement that goes on. It's not one size fits all.
Clarence Hill, Fort Worth Star Telegram. Obviously, you know what a great defense looks like just from your days in Seattle. You're talking to DeMarcus Lawrence and Anthony Brown, the guys who've been around, and this is the best defense they've been on. How good can this defense be?
Well, I think as you're kind of moving forward, each year's new, and it's not an encore. Like I said, it's a new set, a new group. But what I do love about this group, I think we've got a deep crew and we are going to roll in hard. We've got depth at defensive line, we've got depth at linebacker, we've got depth at safety, and we've got some guys that can really go. So by pushing that tempo and that pace of how we want to go and play and be physical, I think we've got the ball hawking mentality. I think we just got to keep pushing that standard of what we want to do together. And that's what I've seen through training camp, and that's why heading into this week, I am so excited because I think of what we can become now. Like most things, you got to go prove it, and it doesn't happen, in a 1 week or 2 weeks. It's going to be over the long haul. But I think this is showing that they can be a crew that can get it on for the long haul.
What is that? What does get it on?
I think it goes into what does our tackling look like? How do we create takeaways? Those are the things that when you communicate better as a defense. I hope when you watch us practice, you can hear us pre-snap, post-snap, the communication, the calls, the very best defenses I've been a part of. Not only did they out-hit people and took the ball, but they were able to talk through pre and post-snap. This is the alerts that's come, hey, Dan, watch for this. You can see where the receiver is. So that, to me, is the final piece. There's a lot of guys that can go hard. There's a lot of guys who have ball skills. But when you put the whole thing together, from the communication, player to player on the field, to me, that's where the special groups come from.
So top 5 defense, you just from.
I think we'll have to see how well we can communicate into that. But I think we have. I'm not a predictor of that. So, I see better than I hear. All right. So I'd rather show you what we can be, all right, than talk about it. All right. Fair enough. Sorry, I wasn't getting where you're at. Sometimes you got to just forget the breadcrumbs and hit me right in the face. All right.
Todd Archer, ESPN. David still has broken 100, by the way, in case you're wondering. Is this the fastest defense that you've had?
We do have, it's probably one of the fastest and the longest, in terms of length of safeties and linebackers with this kind of size and this kind of length. The play speed is where the fast comes from. And the more you know it, the faster you can play. And there may be some guys who can run 4.4 at different positions, but I would say this group I'd put up with anybody in terms of the speed to go play. We've got a lot of speed, and we've got a lot of length, and so that's why that last piece I was speaking about, our communication, on the field pre and post snap, is going to be so critical.
Calvin Watkins, Dallas Morning News. You talk about these guys with the second year jump, but you say this is the best depth you've had in your 2 years here?
For this team?
Yeah.
Yes, I would say that, because I do feel there's some spots that we really have pushed it, and I've seen the improvement take place. Defensive tackle is one that I've seen some guys who are really strong and stout. One of the areas we wanted to improve, quite honestly, was in the run defense inside, to place more square and to play stronger, and I've seen that. You've seen the jump from Bohanna. You've seen it from Gallimore. I know he's not going 1 to 2, but he missed so much time last year that I felt it's appropriate to put him into that bucket, even though he's not that. Does that make sense? So seeing guys like those two improve, Hill missed, damn near an entire year with him coming back. So seeing some of those guys make these jumps at the defensive tackle spot, is certainly something that I think is going to pay dividends for us.
How does Kelvin Joseph look from last year to this year?
I'd say I always knew he had good speed, but I didn't know he had the strength. I thought that's one of the things at the line of scrimmage that I really admire about his game, is how strong he can play. And so in terms of matching up against a stronger, bigger receiver that we definitely see, he's one of the guys you'd want to have challenge at the line of scrimmage, where certain guys you'd want to play off and play the receiver and not allow him to use his size. Kelvin's strength is one that you'd want him to play at the line of scrimmage to battle some of the big guys. So I do like the different kind of versatility that we have on D to challenge different styles of players and different matchups, and that's kind of the fun part about the NFL. Week to week, it might be these tight ends, might be this back, might be this receiver, but there's always all sorts of matchups. That's why I feel fortunate that we got a big, deep crew that we're able to match up against a lot of different styles.
Babe Loftenberg, Dallas Cowboys Radio Network. If you were going up against a guy that had 48 starts, you'd say, hey, this is a veteran guy. A lot of starts under his belt. It's almost comical. I mean, Brady has started 48 playoff games. And when you get a guy like that, you can do two. You can throw your hands in the air and say, well, he's seen everything, so we'll stay static. Or, so when you're game planning for something like that, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think, one, the guy's, a fantastic competitor and just, always seems to, put his team in the position to win at the end. I think going against a competitor like that, you better be at your best at, in the moments of the game where it's going to come right down to it, because that's usually the separator. It's not the first down play, or the second down play. It's within a 2-minute drive, it's in a red zone play to make sure that the intensity is just right and how to match up. Because you're right, a quarterback of his stature will have seen so many looks, but that's why, all 11 and the plays and how do you go and play and match up. To me, that's where the real factors are. And against any good competitor, you can't beat yourself. And I think that's, I went back to watch last year's game. You wish you had some calls back. We weren't quite ready to make some multiple checks within a call, and now we are. But we grew, through the season, but they won't be facing, the same defense that they faced last year, although there'll be some similar faces. I would say our style has evolved quite a bit.
Jory Epstein, USA Today. Micah talked last week about wanting to be the best player in the league, and he said to him he doesn't define the best player in the league as 20 sacks or a certain number of, or a certain statistic, but instead making everyone around him better, taking a team to the championship. How would you define what it would look like if Micah is the best player in the league? And related, how do you balance him keeping or raising everyone around him without distracting from him playing fast?
Yeah, I think that's part of growing up as a competitor. We went through some of that last year when you're chasing plays as opposed to making plays. And any good competitor will tell you, you always want to be in the spot to go make the play. But when you start chasing them to where I think I can make a play over there, but my responsibility is over here, that's the dangerous time. And I think you have to live through that on your way up to know that, boy, I shouldn't have took that chance. And we've got enough good players here to put into the right spot. I can do my job at a really high level. Now, what's nice about our system is that we do put Micah in a lot of different roles where he can be a DB in some alignments, a defensive end, or a linebacker. So having that flexibility is a big piece of it, but I think he's right to say sometimes we can all get so stat-driven that you can forget what's the most important is helping your team win. And the best of the best that I've been around have had an excellent defense. And it would be hard pressed to say on a defense there can be one person that would carry the team, but one person playing their role really well can affect all the others. And I think that's probably what Mike was referring to. And I think that's a real sign for him, having awareness to know there's a lot of good players here that can make some plays, and he's going to make his fair share just by his relentless nature, but he doesn't have to go make a play that's not his. And I think that's one of the real steps you make, and you don't know that until you can go make some mistakes and learn from them. I wish I could tell you what it feels like to be in his shoes and make all sorts of kind of plays, but that certainly is not the case. For me growing up, I have appreciation for what he can do, but I want to make sure it's within the guidelines of the system.
To have what you described earlier as a deep crew that rolls hard, that would seem to require a cultural buy-in of, I'm a linebacker, but I'm not going to play my 60 snaps. I'm a defensive lineman, and I think I should play 40 or 50, but I'm going to play my 25, 30. How do you build that and get that buy-in from players so that when you're rolling guys in,
It's a great question. Yeah, and it's not easy because every good competitor wants to play all the time. Our job is to try to find what things you can do really well and then try to feature them into those roles. And so when we do that and we see guys match up, we try to highlight that and illustrate that to say, hey, this is one thing that this man can do really well. Like you're going to see that, eventually with Cox guarding tight ends, and J.K. is already someone that does that now, or this guy on a blitz or as a situational pass rusher. So we try to highlight those roles that you can have, and maybe it's harder early because those roles aren't defined, and but as you get into the season, hey, this is exactly what the team needs from you. And we did an exercise on that today as the defense where what you thought your role was, and then by the time the meeting ended, but this is also what everybody else needs from you. And it's not always what you think at the start, this is what I can do, but this is what everybody else needs from you. So it is a challenge, but the more that you're connected, the more you push. Once we get into game day, it just comes down to what do we need to do to help win this game.
Are you laminating it for them again this year?
We are, yes. And so it was. I did that last year, and it was a good reminder for me. I probably did that exercise too early last year where we didn't even know each other well enough yet. And so now that we've been under the same roof for a year, so many of us, we have a much better understanding of one another, how to push one another. And so I would expect the results on this year's sheet would look a lot different than last year. So it's a good lesson for me to say you can't establish roles before you're ready to. And now we are.
Dan Rock Phillips, DallasCowboys.com. We're Sam early in training camp, Sam Williams talked about trying to add more tools to his toolbox.
Yep.
Where have you seen him grow, maybe specifically since from now until?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the area that I thought he's improved was really in the run game first, where when you come into the NFL, new techniques, new positions, how to play. We knew he could run, and like he's got physical traits to run and to rush. So I thought I saw less in the real improvement in the run game. The second piece, for my exploring with him, can we put him over a guard and rush to that spot? And now that I saw that's another dimension to his game because he does have enough strength to do that. Not only can he play defensive end, but he can also line up, over a guard and rush in that space. So the more guys you have that can do that and have that kind of versatility, I think that's a big fit.
Go with Todd and finish up with David.
You feel like you can't get rid of this Brady guy?
Where do we start? No, I do have a lot of respect, for the way that he plays. Anybody who can do something at a really high level over the course of a long period, certainly earned my respect, and we've seen it across other sports. But he's certainly the gold standard of what excellent could look like year in and year out, and certainly brings out the best in everybody.
Counterintuitive. Can you be too creative or too diverse? Does there have to be a discipline to it?
Yes, I know exactly where you're heading, and you can be. If you cross the line of, you may have heard the term, you're trying to be too cute. At some point, you also got to line up and go get after somebody. And so I think it's kind of what we were talking about earlier, do you need to have too many looks for this quarterback? At the end of the day, you also have to play really fast and really aggressive. So I think there is a balance to that. Usually it goes into the form of disguise or a look. This could look like this, could look like this. But if it is slowing the player down, our players is what I'm saying, then it should be something that we shouldn't have up, because I think at the end of the day, there's still going to be a lot of plays thrown to people in space where you have to go tackle. And that doesn't have anything to do with the disguise, it has to do with our execution. So it's a great question, and one that you always, or through my career, you always had to keep track of, make sure, hey, keep the main thing. And that's our tackling, our ball hawking, our out hitting. And the disguise is part of it, but you better make sure you play to your play style first and then add in the other wrinkles. And usually if you're trying to do too much, you're not doing the things that you're really exceptional at. And all you guys became exceptional writers, and so that's where your stuff is. If you try to do too many things that are not that, something would not go so well. And so keep the main thing. The main thing is usually a good way to keep yourself on track.
Thank you.
All right, you guys have a good one. See you.